Okay, but look at the part where he compares modern dating to the literal trenches of World War I. Like, he is saying the dating market has evolved faster in the last 3 years than military tech did, going from, horses to tanks.
Oh, yeah, the technological whiplash.
Right. He's talking about going from cavalry charges and bolt-action rifles straight into submarine warfare and aerial dogfights in this blistering 4-year period, and applying that exact same whiplash to how men and women interact today.
It is a completely wild parallel, but, I mean, when you look at the mechanics of it, it actually holds up perfectly. The author, Myron Gaines, in this 2026 update to Why Women Deserve Even Less, he is essentially framing the current dynamic between men and women as a rapid, technologically driven sex war.
Yeah, a literal battlefield.
Exactly. And his core thesis is that if you are using the old tactics, the stuff that worked 5 years ago, you are basically marching a horse-drawn artillery unit into a drone strike.
Which is such a vivid image.
It really is. The landscape has shifted so violently since just 3 years ago that the entire old playbook it means certain death on the modern battlefield.
Which is exactly what grabbed me, because he's saying the days of just, hitting the gym, putting on a clean button-down shirt, and politely messaging a girl on an app are completely functionally obsolete.
You're gone?
It is a suicide mission now. So if you, the listener, if you have been out there recently and you felt like the dating market has suddenly mutated into this unrecognizable, hostile, alien landscape, this text claims to be the definitive intelligence report straight from the front lines of 2026.
Right, and we should just clarify something up front, because Gaines makes some very aggressive, very politically charged claims in this text about gender dynamics, about feminism, economics, all of it.
Oh, absolutely. He pulls zero punches.
None. So the mission here isn't to blindly endorse his entire worldview, but we need to objectively unpack the mechanics of his argument. We need to look at the actual data he's using to describe this modern dating apocalypse, because the numbers he pulls are, well, they're undeniable.
And the first thing we have to look at on this new battlefield is the absolute carnage happening to the infrastructure we all used to rely on, the dating apps themselves. Because he argues that the app industry is the first major casualty of this new era.
The first casualty of the sex war, yeah.
I do want to push back on this for just a second, though, because it feels so counterintuitive to me. Like, everyone is glued to their phones 24/7. People live on their screens. How can the apps be dying?
Well, because you can't have a dating app without dates.
Right. Good point.
It's really that simple at the end of the day. A platform can only coast on the illusion of connection for so long before the user base wakes up and realizes the machine is completely broken. And the raw data he pulls to demonstrate this collapse is just staggering. I mean, Tinder's user base is down 10%.
10%?
Yeah, they've bled down to roughly 9.8 million users. And Bumble is down 16%.
Wait, hold on. Down 16% in what time frame?
Just leading into the third quarter of 2025. They plummeted to 3.57 million users.
Wow.
But the most revealing demographic shift isn't just the raw numbers, it's who is leaving. Gen Z, the generation that is theoretically in their absolute prime biological and social dating years, they now only make up 26% of dating app users.
That is wild.
Millennials are still sort of artificially propping up the market at 61%. But Gen Z looked at the ecosystem, saw the reality of it, and just actively chose to opt out en masse.
That's fascinating. It's like they walked into a casino, watched the millennials pouring their life savings into a slot machine that clearly wasn't paying out, and just turned around and walked right out the door.
That is exactly what happened.
And if the users are leaving, I mean, the money has to be evaporating, right? Wall Street isn't going to just ignore that.
Oh, it is an absolute bloodbath on the financial side. Match Group,
Yeah.
the umbrella corporation that basically monopolized the entire market, watched its stock completely crater by 80%.
80%.
We are talking a drop from a peak of around $169 a share down to the low 30s. And Bumble fell off a cliff. They are down 95%.
Oh my God.
From over $75 a share down to under $4. Wall Street investors have finally woken up to the fact that the core product, which is facilitating two human beings actually meeting in physical reality, has fundamentally failed.
Okay, but why did it fail so catastrophically? Because, I mean, you and I know 5 or 6 years ago, people were actually meeting on these things. You'd go to a wedding and half the couples there met on Hinge or Tinder or whatever. What actually broke the machine?
To understand that, we have to look at how these platforms permanently warped human expectations. I mean, you're familiar with the old Occupid data from years ago, right?
Yeah, the 80-20 rule. The idea that women on the app only found the top 20% of men attractive, while men basically found 80% of women attractive. It was already a pretty skewed dynamic back then.
Right. It was skewed. But the data now from Rolla Tomasi and researchers like Dr. Steve Stewart-Williams show that the old 80-20 rule is basically a relic of a bygone era.
Yeah.
It has devolved into what is now the 80-24.5 rule.
Okay, yeah, I had to read this section of the text 3 times. Break down the math on this for me because it is brutal.
It is brutal. The current reality is that around 60% of men are actively engaging and liking women's profiles. But women are only liking 4.5% of men's profiles.
4.5%. So if you put 100 random guys in a room, the women are only swiping right on 4 of them. Maybe the 5th guy gets a passing glance if the lighting is really good.
Yeah. Exactly. 4.5 out of 100. And the behavioral data totally corroborates this. Christian Rudder's analysis shows that a woman's likelihood of actually sending a message to a man doesn't just gradually increase as he gets more attractive.
Like a normal bell curve.
Right. It doesn't do that. It flatlines for almost everyone and then violently skyrockets only when a man reaches the top 7% of all profiles on the platform.
So it's a winner-take-all economy, completely. It's not a curve anymore. It's a hockey stick graph where only the absolute genetic or financial elite are even visible to the female user base.
The bar for entry, the critical mass required to even be perceived as a potential option, has shifted so drastically. For the bottom 95% of men, the online dating world is literally a statistical ghost town. The data shows that the average man matches with 0.6% of women.
0.6.
Not 6.6.
Which means if you are just a regular, decent guy, you have a job, you're relatively in shape, you're a nice person, you are literally swiping right 10,000 times just to get a handful of matches. And most of those will never even turn into a conversation, let alone a physical date.
It is a staggering waste of human time and energy.
It really is.
Yeah.
But here's the thing I keep getting stuck on looking at this. The apps have the data. Match Group knows this. Bumble knows this. They know 95% of their male user base is just swiping into an empty void. So why haven't they fixed the algorithm to balance it out?
Because they can't. And this is where the economic concept of enshittification comes into play.
Enshittification. I love that word.
It's a very real economic term coined to describe the life cycle of digital platforms. You see, these dating companies went public. They had IPOs. So they are now legally obligated to their shareholders to produce infinite quarter-over-quarter growth.
Right.
But how do you extract infinite financial growth from a fundamentally broken ecosystem where the female user base has zero interest in 95% of the men, and the male user base is utterly, totally exhausted?
You can't actually improve the product because the user's behavior is the problem, so you just have to start squeezing the users you have left. You squeeze water from a stone.
Exactly. You pivot to predatory tactics.
Yeah.
You introduce these opaque, convoluted pricing tiers. Suddenly, it's not just a premium version, right? It's bronze, silver, gold, platinum, onyx.
Yeah, it sounds like a credit card scam.
And they intentionally throttle your profile's visibility. If you don't pay for a boost, they literally just hide you from the women.
I've seen guys talk about this on forums. They talk about the algorithm manipulation. When you first download the app, they show you to everyone. You get a massive rush of matches. You think, oh, wow, this is great. I'm doing so well. And then 3 days later, dead silence. The algorithm just buries you.
Yep, the honeymoon period ends.
And suddenly, a little pop-up appears on your screen saying, hey, want to be seen again? Give us $20.
It is entirely by design. They also use the algorithm to show you highly attractive elite profiles right when you join. The 4.5% of women you actually really want to talk to, just to set the hook. But the moment you subscribe, those profiles magically vanish.
It's literally a slot machine. But I mean, it's worse than a slot machine because a physical slot machine in Vegas actually has to pay out occasionally by law to keep its gaming license. This is a slot machine that is mathematically programmed to never hit the jackpot, and now they are charging you a monthly subscription fee just to look at the lever.
That is a perfect analogy.
And what about the dynamic pricing part? Because that part of the text genuinely blew my mind.
Oh, the dynamic pricing is incredibly cynical. The data shows these apps utilize algorithmic dynamic pricing models. They analyze your demographic data, your age, your location, and your swipe desperation.
Swipe desperation.
Yeah, how fast and how often you're swiping right. They will literally charge a lonely 45-year-old divorced man significantly more money for the exact same premium feature than they would charge a 28-year-old guy.
Just because they can?
Simply because their behavioral algorithms predict the older man has higher disposable income and a much higher threshold of desperation.
They are mathematically weaponizing male loneliness. It's evil. But the ultimate proof that the whole structure is collapsing has to be the Bumble situation, right? Because Bumble was supposed to be the antidote to all of this toxicity.
Bumble is the perfect case study for this collapse.
Hmm.
Their entire brand identity, their unique value proposition in the market, was women message first. It was marketed for years as this empowering feminist shift in dating dynamics.
Right. It gave women total control to filter out unwanted attention from guys they didn't like.
Exactly. But then they quietly killed their core feature.
Why? I mean, that was their whole thing.
Because the feature failed in practice. They had to rescind it because women, overwhelmingly, simply refused to initiate the conversation.
They wouldn't send the first text.
No. The curtain was completely pulled back on the reality of user behavior. Even when handed total control of the ecosystem, the vast majority of women did not want the burden of pursuing, initiating, or risking rejection.
The behavioral reality clashed so violently with the marketing narrative that the company had to abandon its foundational premise just to survive.
It was the nail in the coffin for the illusion of how these apps were supposed to work.
Okay, so if the traditional apps are a rigged slot machine and the average guy is getting 0 matches and Bumble has completely abandoned its identity, where the hell is everyone going? If they aren't on Tinder, where are they? Because the author makes a very specific and honestly shocking claim here that women are migrating to sugar sites.
It does.
And my initial reaction to that was, come on, that's a fringe thing, that's for reality TV stars. But he argues this is becoming the mainstream default due to a very specific triad of forces.
He argues that this migration isn't a fringe anomaly at all anymore. It's the highly predictable outcome of 3 intersecting forces: political, cultural, and economic. Let's unpack the political force first, because he points to a multi-decade, deliberate dismantling of the traditional nuclear family structure.
Okay, how does that connect to dating apps, though? Walk me through the causality there.
Well, the argument is that for generations, the social contract was built around the necessity of a male provider. But over the last several decades, women have been heavily culturally incentivized and propagandized to believe that relying on a traditional male provider is actually a form of subjugation. The idea of marrying primarily for financial support or stability was made socially unacceptable. It was heavily stigmatized as being dependent or weak.
I see. So if a guy is in her life now, he's supposed to be this, like, co-equal business colleague. He's a lifestyle accessory, but actually needing him is framed as a threat to her autonomy.
Precisely. But that political shift immediately collided with a cultural shift. Culturally, the author argues we have entered an era of zero accountability, where societal narratives relentlessly shield women from the consequences of poor life choices, shifting all blame to systemic issues or external factors. And simultaneously, you have the massive rebranding of the sex trade.
Oh, the rebranding is wild. Because if you look at the marketing copy for these sugar sites, they never, ever use the word prostitution. They never use the word sex work.
Never. The language is meticulously crafted to sound empowering. They use terms like luxury dating, or redefining modern chivalry, or connecting with sophisticated individuals who match your ambition.
It's brilliant marketing.
They frame it as an exclusive networking opportunity for elite women.
Elevate your lifestyle by only dating men who are worthy of the woman you want to become. It sounds like an ad for a high-end Amex card. It's incredible corporate spin. They took the oldest profession in the world, slapped a venture capital tech aesthetic on it, and sold it back to Gen Z as female empowerment. But, I mean, you can't just spin something out of thin air. People have to actually need the money to go do this. Which brings us to the third force, the absolute engine driving all of this, the economics.
The economic reality is the linchpin. The author frames this as a self-imposed but structurally reinforced financial crisis among young women.
Yeah.
Think about the economic environment of the last few years. You have an entire generation of women who were told to take on massive, exponential student loan debt to acquire university degrees that possess almost zero tangible market value.
Right, the classic trap. Go to college, study whatever, just get a degree.
Add to that the resumption of federal student loan payments, rampant runaway inflation that has decimated purchasing power for basic necessities like rent and groceries.
Yeah, eggs are a luxury item now.
And then you have the looming threat of AI and corporate outsourcing, systematically eliminating the low-paying administrative or make-work jobs that historically absorb these graduates.
So you have a 24-year-old who is graduating with $80,000 in debt. She has a degree in something completely unmonetizable. She's working a job that barely covers her electric bill, and she has been culturally told that traditional marriage is oppressive. What are her options?
Her options are incredibly limited. And this is why the user base on these platforms has exploded. Seeking Arrangement went from 2 million users in 2013 to over 25 million by 2024.
25 million.
OnlyFans surpassed 400 million accounts and generated $7.9 billion in a single year.
Those numbers are astronomical. It's a parallel economy.
It is, but here is the critical nuance the text emphasizes, and this is where it affects the average listener. It is not just about the explicit sugar sites. The real danger for the average guy isn't the woman who is openly managing an OnlyFans or explicitly stating she is a sugar baby on Seeking Arrangement. The real shift is the rise of what he calls soft sugaring, and it involves the entirely normal girl.
The normal girl. Explain that. How does that work?
This is a woman who would be deeply, genuinely insulted if you called her a sex worker. She considers herself a modern, independent professional. But out of sheer economic desperation masked by cultural conditioning, she enters the dating market with the baseline expectation that a man must systematically subsidize her life as a prerequisite for her presence.
Wait, so you're telling me a guy is expected to go on a date, and the underlying expectation is that he needs to help pay off the $50,000 journalism degree that she used to basically party for 4 years? That is fucking insane. It's just delayed reaction sugar babying.
That is exactly the dynamic.
You're literally subsidizing a lifestyle she already lived in the past with other people just for the privilege of buying her a steak dinner on a Tuesday. It's like being asked to pay off someone else's mortgage just so you can rent their guest room for one night.
It's a profound shift in the social contract of dating. The author is highlighting that subsidizing her financial deficits is becoming an unavoidable upfront toll just to enter the arena. We have transitioned into a hyper-literal pay-to-play reality.
Pay to play.
Yet that the average guy is no longer just competing against a more handsome guy on Tinder. He is competing against the immediate financial relief offered by older, wealthier men on sugar apps, and he's competing against the baseline expectation that he should function as a financial bailout.
But the crazy part is the author actually says the women's logic here is entirely rational. Like he doesn't just call them crazy.
No, from a purely utilitarian standpoint, it is highly rational. They are financially drowning. Traditional marriage is culturally discouraged. They are emotionally exhausted from being pumped and dumped by that top 4.5% of men on the dating apps.
Right.
Sugaring, whether hard or soft, offers clearly defined parameters. There are no guessing games. It is a clean transaction. It provides physical safety, networking with high-net-worth individuals, and direct financial exchange without the exhausting cognitive load of romantic ambiguity.
It makes sense on paper for them. But the average guy making $65,000 a year simply cannot afford to be a financial bailout mechanism. The financial and emotional toll is just entirely exorbitant. So what happens? Because something has to give.
What happens is a massive structural collapse. Because men are refusing, or simply cannot afford to pay this toll, both genders are effectively abandoning the physical dating world entirely. They are retreating.
This brings us to this massive concept in the book of the digital retreat. If men are checking out because they can't pay the toll, then women's traditional sources of real-world validation, getting approached at a bar, getting asked out at a bookstore, getting hit on at the gym, those are drying up. The well is completely empty.
And nature abhors a vacuum. Because they are no longer receiving that validation in the physical world, they have retreated into digital isolation to find it. The statistics on this behavioral shift are genuinely alarming. Young women are now spending up to 70% of their free time online.
70%.
We're talking over 3.5 hours every single day strictly dedicated to social media.
And it's not Twitter or reading articles either. It is very specifically visual platforms. The data says 78% are using Facebook, 55% are on Instagram, 42% on TikTok. The author calls Instagram the ultimate validation engine. But why? What is the actual psychological mechanism happening there?
The mechanism is the extraction of synthetic value versus tangible value. In the physical world, developing tangible value requires immense painful effort. You have to learn a complex hard skill, you have to build a business from scratch, you have to spend years cultivating a deep intellect or a unique talent. It takes time and it takes friction.
Right? It's hard work. It's supposed to be hard.
But social media platforms, specifically visual ones, allow for the frictionless creation of synthetic value. Through the use of digital filters, ring lights, specific angles, and heavily curated posting, a woman can mine a nearly infinite supply of male sexual attention.
Even if it's just like a bunch of thirsty random guys from another country leaving fire emojis in her comments, does that actually count?
It does. Exactly. Even if that attention is incredibly low quality, the sheer volume of it triggers the dopamine receptors in the brain. It functions as a highly addictive, frictionless digital currency that replaces the need for real-world accomplishment. They are deriving their entire sense of self-worth and social standing without having to endure any actual physical friction or work in reality.
But validation doesn't replace romance, right? I mean, likes don't keep you warm at night. So if real-world romantic lives are vanishing, how are they filling that specific gap? Because the data here is where we get into some real sci-fi dystopia stuff.
They are replacing men with entirely synthetic alternatives. The text notes that 23% of young women are now actively using romantic AI chatbots.
Nearly a quarter of young women are literally dating software.
And the female erotica industry is experiencing an unprecedented boom. Sales of female smut doubled to 39 million copies recently. The author even cites a massive millennial bestseller titled Morning Glory Milking Farm, which, and this is real, involves a woman working in a facility extracting semen from minotaurs.
I don't even know what to do with that information. A minotaur farm. But it proves the point. It's a complete substitution of reality. They are retreating into fantasy because the real world is too messy, it's too expensive, or it's too disappointing. But what happens when they actually do try to interact with real men online? Because they aren't totally off the apps, right? They still have profiles.
They are on the apps, but the intent has completely mutated. It has devolved into what the author terms the hedonic treadmill of always vetting.
Okay, stop there. Explain the hedonic treadmill concept for a second, because that's a crucial psychological concept.
Hedonic adaptation, the hedonic treadmill, is a psychological concept where humans rapidly return to a baseline level of happiness despite major positive or negative changes. In this context, it means that no matter how good a man looks on an app, the dopamine hit of matching with him fades almost instantly.
Oh, whoa.
So the woman has to keep swiping, keep searching for a slightly better profile, a slightly taller guy, slightly richer guy, just to get that exact same initial rush.
It's the ultimate window shopping. You aren't buying the shoes, you just like the thrill of trying them on and looking in the mirror. And he points to these external ecosystems that have popped up just to support this window shopping. Apps called T, or those massive Facebook groups called Are We Dating the Same Guy?
Those groups are a perfect symptom of the pathology. Originally, they were pitched as safety networks, right, to warn women about dangerous men. But they have largely morphed into entertainment hubs. Women are using these platforms not to actually secure a physical date, but to cyber-stalk, to gossip, and to window shop for dopamine hits.
They are treating local men's dating profiles like Pokemon cards. They collect the stats, they screenshot the bios, they drop them in the group chat to trade and compare with their friends, and they have absolutely zero intention of ever actually meeting the guy for a cup of coffee. It's purely a digital sport.
It is a vetting process, stripped entirely of its end goal. But you cannot live in a synthetic environment forever without severe psychological consequences. The text points to a massive cognitive dissonance that is rupturing these women's mental health.
Because they have two totally different lives.
Exactly. You have a young woman living a highly curated, photoshopped, heavily validated life online as her digital avatar. Hundreds of likes, thousands of views, constant positive reinforcement.
She's a celebrity in her phone.
But when she puts the phone down, she is sitting alone in an expensive apartment she can barely afford, failing to achieve tangible success, failing to secure a stable partner, and failing to find actual love in reality.
The gap between who she is on Instagram and who she is on a Tuesday night sitting on her couch is a chasm.
And falling into that chasm is driving a massive mental health crisis. We are seeing unprecedented spikes in clinical depression, extreme anxiety disorders, and a skyrocketing reliance on SSRIs among this specific demographic.
Okay, so if you are a guy listening to this and you do somehow manage to get through the algorithm, you dodge the sugar expectations, and you somehow get her attention away from the AI Minotaur chatbots and the vetting groups, you are now facing an entirely different, incredibly warped expectation of what a man is supposed to be. And this is where we have to talk about the influencer paradox, because this fundamentally rewrote the rules of status, didn't it?
Completely. The landscape of human status has been fundamentally and permanently altered by the internet. If you look back just a few decades, media was heavily consolidated. Creating a movie, a television show, or a national radio broadcast required massive centralized capital.
You had to have a massive studio backing you. You couldn't just do it in your basement.
Right, and because the barrier to entry was so immense, there were only a very small handful of A-list celebrities. These people, the Brad Pitts, the Tom Cruises, the George Clooney's, they were distant, heavily managed, untouchable gods. They lived behind velvet ropes.
But the internet completely decentralized all of that. Now, anyone with a $50 webcam, a decent microphone, and a ring light can broadcast to the entire planet and build an audience.
The democratization of media creation destroyed the old celebrity model. The data shows the shift is absolute. 84% of Gen Z explicitly state they trust internet influencers more than they trust traditional celebrities. Corporate brands understand this too. They are pouring $32.5 billion into influencer marketing because it yields a vastly higher return on investment than hiring a Hollywood actor for a commercial.
But why? Why does a 22-year-old girl trust a random girl doing a makeup haul on TikTok more than she trusts an Oscar-winning actress?
Because influencers possess two highly potent traits that traditional celebrities completely lack: perceived authenticity and unprecedented accessibility. An influencer isn't a polished actor reading a script written by a committee of 50 executives. They're usually just sitting in their messy bedroom speaking directly into the lens. They feel like a peer.
They feel real. They feel like your friend.
And crucially, they interact. They read their live chat, they respond to comments, they do Q&A sessions. This constant direct feedback loop forms what psychologists call a parasocial bond. The viewer genuinely believes they are friends with the influencer, even though the influencer has no idea who they are.
And this is the core problem, the absolute poison pill for the average guy trying to date today. Because a woman knows, logically, she is never, ever going to date Brad Pitt. He is mathematically impossible. He lives in a different universe. But an influencer, there are literally millions of mid-tier influencers out there. They are just regular guys who happen to have an audience. They feel attainable.
The illusion of attainability is the trap.
Right. So she's not chasing Henry Cavill. She knows she can't get Superman. But she is chasing Ivor Iverson, the 28-year-old Nordic cooking influencer with 400,000 followers who makes sourdough bread on TikTok. Because one time she left a comment on his video, and he actually liked the comment and DM'd her a little heart emoji.
And that single heart emoji is an unbelievably potent hit of dopamine. It feeds the profound delusion that she is actively in the running for a high-status mate, and because there are literally millions of these micro and macro influencers online, women are constantly being breadcrumbed by these tiny digital interactions.
It blinds them. If you think you have a shot with the guy who has 500,000 followers, why would you ever look twice at the accountant who works in your office building or the guy checking out next to you at the grocery store? The influencer paradox renders normal physical men totally invisible.
The text utilizes a very sharp analogy here. It describes the current iteration of Instagram as an ongoing, never-ending digital high school Playboy mansion party. But the rules for entry at the front door are completely comically skewed between the genders.
Yes, women get into this party based purely on a baseline of physical aesthetics. A genuinely gorgeous girl who works part-time at a diner and lives in a trailer park gets VIP access, hundreds of thousands of followers, and immediate validation. She walks right past the velvet rope.
But for men, the entry requirements are exponentially more rigid. A man must possess high demonstrable status and social clout just to be allowed into the room, let alone noticed. If you are just a regular decent guy, you pay your taxes, you treat people well, you have a good heart, but you lack a curated high-status digital footprint, you do not exist at this party. You are effectively a ghost.
Which begs the ultimate terrifying question. If the pursuit of status is this endless treadmill, if the vetting never stops, if the apps are a slot machine, what is the actual end goal? What do women actually want in this market? Because it feels like a moving target.
To answer that, the author introduces a psychological framework from Dr. Orion Taraban. And the theory is beautifully, elegantly, and terrifyingly simple. Women want what other women want.
Okay, unpack that, because on the surface that sounds like a cliche, but what is the actual psychological mechanism there?
It's rooted in the concept of mimetic desire, originally theorized by the philosopher René Girard. The idea is that human beings don't actually know what to desire on their own. We don't have spontaneous, original desires. Instead, we look to our peers, our models, and we mimic their desires.
Like the sneaker market, no one actually intrinsically desires a specific, ugly, chunky shoe. But the second a high-status rapper or the cool kid at school wears it, suddenly everyone is fighting in the streets to pay $1,000 for it. The value isn't in the shoe, the value is in the fact that other people want the shoe.
Exactly. Caravan applies this directly to female dating psychology. It is a constantly moving, mimetic target. A woman's criteria for a partner is rarely an objective, static standard of what constitutes a good, moral man. It's a mimetic desire based entirely on current societal trends and the consensus of her peer group.
So it changes based on what TikTok says is cool this week.
Yes. If her specific peer group suddenly values a certain aesthetic, say the finance bro look, or a specific income bracket or a specific lifestyle of international travel, that immediately becomes her baseline requirement.
And because the internet and social media algorithms are constantly accelerating and escalating those trends every single day, the target never, ever stops moving. Today it's a guy with a boat. Tomorrow it's a guy with a tech startup. Next week it's a guy who does barefoot wilderness retreats in Bali. You can't catch it.
Which leads to a very sobering conclusion. If the target is perpetually moving based on algorithmic trends, then this modern sex war does not have an armistice. There is no peace treaty to sign. You cannot negotiate a permanent ceasefire by simply becoming a quote-unquote better guy.
And this is where the author uses the analogy of the 1963 John Wayne movie McClintock. I love this pull so much. In the movie, McClintock is this wealthy, powerful cattle baron, and his estranged wife comes back to town demanding all these concessions, trying to force him to play by her high society rules. And McClintock's response is basically, no, I am not playing your game.
The author argues that trying to constantly appease these shifting mimetic demands is a guaranteed fool's errand. The only way for a man to actually win in this dynamic, according to the text, is to completely stop playing her game. You must lead unapologetically, construct your own valuable life, and demand that she step out of the digital high school and join your reality. You do not conform to her synthetic standards. You force her to adapt to your tangible ones.
But the wild thing is, the data suggests that instead of trying to pull women out of the matrix and into their reality, a massive, historically unprecedented contingent of men are just looking at the battlefield, dropping their weapons, and walking away entirely. We are witnessing a profound male exodus from the dating market.
The statistics on this exodus are genuinely grim. 39% of Gen Z men now report having absolutely zero interest in pursuing dating or relationships.
Oh, yeah.
33% of young men are virgins. And perhaps most tellingly about the death of physical courage in the market, 45% of men aged 18 to 25 haven't asked a woman out in person in the last year.
Almost half of young men haven't even attempted to ask a girl out to her face in 365 days. That is staggering. But again, why? Is it just fear of rejection? Because guys have always been afraid of rejection.
The author attributes it to a much colder, more mathematical calculation. It is a simple analysis of return on investment, or ROI. To illustrate this, he cites the economist Aaron Clarey, specifically his work in The Book of Numbers.
Oh man, this math is going to hurt. I can feel it.
It is sobering. Clarey calculates the holistic cost of pursuing women for the average man, factoring in dinners, drinks, gas, haircuts, clothes bought specifically to impress, gym memberships, and the sheer volume of hours spent swiping, texting, and going on dead-end dates. He estimates the average man spends roughly $265,000 in pure cash expenses chasing women over his lifetime.
$250,000 just on dates and outfits.
But that is just the raw cash. If you take that $265,000 and you factor in the massive amount of time squandered, and you assume that all of that capital and time was instead aggressively invested into an S&P 500 index fund over a 40-year period,
Holy shit.
the compound interest is devastating.
You're literally giving up $10 million to get rejected at a Tuesday night trivia event. That is the actual math. $9.6 million in lost generational lifetime wealth, surrendered just for the attempt to navigate a market where the women only like 4.5% of the men anyway.
When men subconsciously or consciously realize they are facing a catastrophic negative ROI, they make the highly rational choice to exit the market. But the male sex drive doesn't just disappear, it just gets rerouted. So just as women found synthetic replacements in AI minotaurs and validation engines, Men are finding their own synthetic pacifiers.
Right, men aren't just becoming monks on a mountain. They are replacing the grueling pursuit of real women with hyper-accessible, flawless digital alternatives. Pornography consumption is off the charts. They are adopting AI companions. The text mentions Joy AI and Candy AI, where they can have a perfectly tailored, submissive digital girlfriend who never asks for a $200 dinner. And then there's the physical element.
The text highlights the rapid growth of the advanced sex doll market, noting it is currently a $450 million industry growing at 19% annually. As the technology improves and the social stigma decreases, it presents a frictionless, zero-rejection alternative to the crushing financial and emotional demands of modern dating.
And for the guys not going the synthetic route, they are just aggressively redirecting that massive reservoir of time and capital into themselves. They're throwing themselves into their careers. They are buying property, diving obsessively into niche hobbies, and honestly, literally just getting 8 hours of uninterrupted sleep because they aren't arguing over text at 2 a.m.
So if we pull back and look at the macro picture we've painted today, we have a completely dying and shittified app ecosystem. We have the rise of a mandatory pay-to-play sugar economy. We have a digital delusion fueled by parasocial influencer bonds and mimetic desire, leading to a massive mathematically driven male exodus. The market, as described, is a dystopian nightmare.
It's a total wasteland. So this is the pivotal moment for the listener. If you are a guy listening to this briefing into 2026 and you are standing in the middle of this wasteland, what is the actual tactical advice? How do you survive? What is the author's precise playbook?
The text outlines a very specific multi-tiered strategy, but it starts with the absolute non-negotiable fundamentals. Before you even attempt to engage the market, you must secure the base. The first pillar is fitness.
Which sounds basic, hit the gym, but he explains why it's so critical mechanically.
Hitting the gym and building a physically imposing physique does one very specific thing. It completely removes the negotiation of baseline physical attraction. In a world where only the top 4.5% get noticed, physical fitness is the absolute fastest way to force yourself into a higher percentile. It simplifies the initial interaction. If you are visibly in shape, you instantly bypass a massive layer of her subconscious vetting process.
Second fundamental, you have to build actual hobbies, skills, and accomplishments. And the author uses this incredible anecdote about an Indian grad student that perfectly illustrates the problem.
It's a very tragic but incredibly common archetype.
Right. This guy did everything society told him to do. He kept his head down, he got the advanced STEM degree, he secured the high-paying corporate tech job. He did everything quote-unquote right on paper, but he is profoundly miserable because he cannot get a woman to look at him. And the brutal truth, the author points out, is because he has no life. He has no soul.
He's a resume.
Exactly. You cannot just be a walking corporate resume. A woman cannot fall in love with an NPC whose only traits are coding and paying taxes. You have to have a personality, an edge, a charisma that is forged by actual friction in the real world.
You must become a three-dimensional human being. And the third fundamental is securing your finances. It is the cold, hard realization that you cannot support a relationship, especially in an inflationary, soft sugar economy where you are expected to be the financial bedrock if you are structurally broke.
Get in shape, get a personality, get some money. Okay, assuming a guy has done the grueling work to secure the base, he's ready. What is the tactical maneuver?
This is where the author introduces his primary real-world tactic, which he titles Operation Gazelle.
Which is such a badass name, and the historical analogy he uses to explain it is brilliant. He points to Ariel Sharon's legendary armored maneuver during the 1973 Yom Kippur War.
The strategic concept is exploiting an exposed flank. During that war, Sharon realized the enemy's front lines were heavily fortified, but there was a massive, completely empty gap between the Egyptian armies. He didn't attack the strength, he drove his tanks right through the empty seam. The author applies this directly to modern dating.
Because everyone is so completely exhausted by the dating apps and everyone is isolated online behind their screens, women's real-world physical defenses are completely down. No one is supporting them anymore. The 45% of guys who won't ask a girl out, that means the grocery store, the coffee shop, the bookstore, those are empty seams. The flank is entirely exposed.
Because the cultural expectation of a public real-world approach has virtually vanished, a man who acts decisively in the physical world stands out immediately. He bypasses the algorithm entirely. He separates himself from the thousands of identical, cowardly digital DMs sitting in her inbox.
But the execution is everything here. You can't just walk up and stumble through it.
Exactly. The author strongly advises against the old pickup artist method of trying to engage a woman in a 5-minute, charming, witty conversation in the middle of a Target parking lot. It's too high pressure, it's socially awkward, and women's defenses will immediately spike. Instead, he advocates for what he calls the airstrike.
The 20-second airstrike, it is surgical.
Yeah.
You see a girl you find attractive. You walk directly up to her. You hand her a piece of paper with your number on it. You look her in the eye and say, hey, I think you're cute. I'm busy right now, but text me. And you immediately turn around and walk away. Boom, over.
It is remarkably efficient. By immediately walking away, you remove all the social pressure from the interaction. She doesn't have to figure out how to reject you safely. But more importantly, you put the ball entirely in her court.
You are exploiting the gap in the market with maximum efficiency and zero emotional investment. You don't care if she texts. You don't care if she has a boyfriend. You don't care if she throws the paper in the trash. You executed the maneuver, you demonstrated supreme physical confidence, and you moved on with your day.
Now, if the direct airstrike isn't your style, or you want to stack the deck further, the text suggests seeking out situational alpha environments.
This is about controlling the terrain.
Yes, it involves finding a very specific, confined social ecosystem or niche where your career, your hobby, or your expertise naturally elevates your status among the women in that specific room. The author uses the extreme example of a model broker, a man whose literal profession requires him to coordinate, manage, and hold authority over beautiful women. His status in that specific ecosystem is unquestionable.
But for the normal guy, the example he uses is becoming an accomplished salsa dancing instructor. If you walk into a salsa club and you are the best dancer in the room and you are teaching the class in that room, for those 2 hours, you are the highest status male on the planet to those women. It doesn't matter if you drive a Honda Civic and work in IT during the day. In the microenvironment, you possess the situational alpha.
You manipulate the context to ensure you are the prize. However, the author acknowledges that for many men, the domestic ecosystem of modern Western dating is simply too culturally toxic and economically warped to salvage, which leads to the macro strategy.
The nuclear option. Because the author looks at the macro data and claims that, due to the political and cultural forces we talked about, only 2.7% of American women are actually viable traditional marriage material. So if you were a guy who genuinely wants a family, you want a traditional wife, you want children, you cannot fish in a poisoned pond. You have to become a passport bro.
You have to be willing to play an away game. The strategy dictates that you must leverage your Western currency and status, board an airplane, and fly to a completely different city, or more likely a foreign country. You seek out nations with strong traditional values, lower costs of living, and a culture that hasn't been ravaged by the social forces driving the domestic sex war. You go where the soil is actually fertile for building the life you want.
But, and this is a big but, what if a guy simply refuses to do the cold approach? He can't dance salsa, and he can't afford to move to Colombia. What if he insists on playing the game online?
If a man absolutely insists on navigating the digital space, the text outlines one final mandatory requirement: the construction of the Instagram resume.
You have to build the avatar.
Precisely. Because women will inevitably, 100% of the time, vet a man online before agreeing to a date. Having a highly curated, defensively engineered corporate brochure of a profile is absolutely essential. It is your digital credit score.
And it has to hit 4 very specific pillars to pass the vetting process. Pillar 1, fitness. You have to subtly but clearly show off the gym work. Prove you aren't physically lazy. Pillar 2, success. Prove you aren't going to need her to subsidize you. The author literally says, if you have to fake a prestigious LinkedIn profile just to get past the initial filter, do it.
It's all about projecting stability.
Pillar 3, social circles. You have to have photos proving you have access to the cool kids. She needs to know that she will tangibly gain social status by being seen with you. You have to be pre-selected by other attractive people. And finally, pillar 4, lifestyle. You have to showcase those unique, high-friction hobbies so you aren't just another generic guy in sunglasses holding a dead fish on a boat.
You have to meticulously construct this perfect, flawless digital avatar just to wedge your foot in the door of the digital Playboy mansion.
It sounds exhausting.
It is, which is why, importantly, the text concludes by granting men something very rare in this space: permission to simply step away.
Just opt out.
The author openly acknowledges that the financial, emotional, and psychological demands placed on men by modern society, combined with the sheer mathematical insanity of this dating market, are fundamentally unsustainable. Taking a break, focusing entirely on oneself, preserving your peace, and opting out of the sex war is not framed as cowardice. It is presented as a highly rational, logical response to a profoundly irrational environment.
Think about this. Really internalize this if you're listening right now. Gaines' ultimate survival guide for the modern dating apocalypse requires you to do one of three things. You either have to become a highly curated, defensively engineered digital influencer, or you have to physically flee your own culture and play an away game in a foreign country, or you have to meticulously manufacture a flawless Instagram resume just to prove to a stranger that you have a soul. But if winning the modern sex war requires constructing a completely synthetic version of yourself, at what point does winning become exactly the same thing as surrendering?